The scorching sun of the Philippines punished the dusty streets of General Santos City as Gervonta Davis, with his dark sunglasses and discreet cap, tried to go unnoticed in the crowd. The American champion had decided to make this trip without announcements, away from the spotlight and cameras that normally followed him. His team had insisted that he take at least one security guard, but Davis wanted to experience the country genuinely, to feel the same atmosphere that had shaped one of his greatest boxing idols. The narrow and busy streets were a labyrinth of vendors, motorcycles, and barefoot children running around. The smell of fried food mixed with the salty aroma of the nearby sea, creating a sensory symphony that Davis had never experienced before. On street corners, small groups of boys simulated boxing matches, imitating the movements that had made Manny Pacquiao a living legend. It was as if the spirit of the great champion was impregnated in every corner of this city. Following the instructions scribbled on a crumpled piece of paper, Davis approached the Tango neighborhood, a humble area where Pacquiao had spent his childhood in extreme poverty. The simple houses, many made of improvised materials, contrasted drastically with Davis's mansion in Baltimore. The American boxer felt his heart tighten as he imagined a young Manny running through these same streets, with dreams bigger than circumstances allowed him to believe. A group of children noticed his presence, and even without fully recognizing him, they sensed he was someone important. Their curious gazes followed Davis as he walked cautiously, trying to locate the specific house where his idol had grown up. Poverty was evident, but there was also a dignity in the air, a resilience that seemed to define not only Pacquiao but the entire Filipino people that Davis observed with growing admiration. The house was at the end of a narrow alley, almost imperceptible to those who didn't know what to look for. It was a simple structure, partially rebuilt as a memorial, but maintaining the original essence of extreme simplicity where the great champion had begun his journey. Davis stopped in front of the house, took a deep breath, and felt a wave of emotion cross his body. It wasn't just a historic boxing site he was visiting, but the cradle of a story of overcoming that had inspired millions around the world, including himself. An elderly lady sitting near the entrance of the house observed Davis with curious eyes. She was Pacquiao's aunt, one of the few relatives who still maintained a connection with the historic site, occasionally receiving the most dedicated fans who made the pilgrimage there. Her wrinkled face opened into a gentle smile when she noticed the reverential respect with which the young American observed the humble residence. Without needing words, she gestured for him to enter, a silent invitation to see the interior of the house. The internal space was even smaller than Davis had imagined. A main room served as living room, kitchen, and living area, with only a curtain separating what would have been the family's bedroom. The dirt floor and simple wooden walls told the story of deprivation that Pacquiao had faced. Old black and white photos decorated the walls, showing a thin and determined boy who would become a legend of world sport. Davis gently touched one of the photos, feeling a deep connection with that boy who, like him, had found in boxing a way out of poverty. The lady offered Davis a cup of local tea, served in simple and cracked dishware. The sweet aroma of the drink filled the environment as the elderly woman, through gestures and some broken English, told stories of Manny's childhood. She spoke about how young Pacquiao would wake up before dawn to run, how he sold bread in the streets to help support the family, and how his first pair of boxing gloves had been bought with borrowed money. With each story, Davis felt his admiration grow even more. Through the small, glassless window, Davis observed the neighborhood children playing in the street. Their thin and agile bodies resembled the physique of young Pacquiao in the photos. Some of them practiced punches in the air, probably dreaming of following in the footsteps of the great national hero. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in the American champion's mind, something that transcended the simple tourist visit he had initially planned. There was a greater purpose in his presence there, something he still couldn't completely define. Before leaving, the lady showed Davis a special corner of the house, where a small improvised altar kept Pacquiao's first trophies and medals. They were simple pieces, some even broken, but kept with the same care that would be dedicated to treasures. Davis removed his cap as a sign of respect, taking a moment of silence before those symbols of perseverance. As he left the house, he knew that visit had changed something inside him, awakening feelings and ideas he hadn't thought possible before stepping on that sacred ground for the boxing world. The next morning, Davis got up before dawn, inspired by the accounts of young Pacquiao's training routine. The streets of General Santos were still silent as he ran, feeling the humid air of the Philippines fill his lungs. Children who woke up early to help their parents recognized the American boxer and began to run alongside him, imitating his movements. What started as a solitary run transformed into a small procession, with Davis leading a growing group of young admirers. Upon returning to the city center, Davis noticed a small, improvised boxing gym in a warehouse. The place was rudimentary, with patched punching bags and a ring whose ropes were made of repurposed materials. Young fighters trained with impressive dedication, despite the precarious conditions. The trainer, a middle-aged man with scars from old fights, immediately recognized Davis and invited him in. The young boxers stopped their exercises, watching with admiration the champion who was now among them. The American spent the entire morning at the gym, demonstrating techniques and sharing knowledge with the young Filipino fighters. His hands, accustomed to knocking out opponents in luxury arenas around the world, now delicately adjusted the posture of boys who dreamed of following in Pacquiao's footsteps. Davis saw in those eyes the same fire, the same determination that had driven his own career from the ghettos of Baltimore. The language barrier meant little when the universal language of boxing allowed perfect communication between the champion and the aspirants. During the training, Davis couldn't help but notice the conditions of the equipment. Torn gloves were shared among several fighters, mouthguards were improvised, and the punching bags were so patched they looked more like patchwork quilts. The contrast with the state-of-the-art gyms where he trained in the United States was striking. However, what was lacking in structure was made up for in determination and natural talent. One boy in particular caught his attention. He was no more than 12 years old, but possessed a hand speed that resembled Pacquiao himself in his early years. Upon leaving the gym, Davis felt a mixture of admiration and discomfort. Admiration for the resilience of those young people who, despite all difficulties, persisted in their dream. Discomfort at realizing the abyss between the resources available to athletes in different parts of the world. Walking back to the hotel, he passed by sports equipment stores, observing prices and making mental calculations. The idea that had begun to form the day before was now taking concrete shape in his mind. He would not just be a visitor to the Philippines. He could leave a much more significant legacy than his mere presence. 3 days later, a large van parked in front of the small gym in General Santos. The young boxers and their trainer watched curiously as several men began unloading boxes and equipment. Davis emerged from the van with a discreet smile, observing the confusion on the faces of those who didn't understand what was happening. The American had spent the last few days in Manila, the country's capital, acquiring the best boxing equipment available. Professional punching bags, head protections, gloves of different weights, mouthguards, bandages, and even a new ring that would replace the improvised one. The trainer approached Davis with tears in his eyes, unable to find words to express his gratitude. The boys ran from side to side, touching the new equipment with the reverence of those receiving an unexpected treasure. The American boxer had invested a considerable amount of his own money, but the sparkle in those young eyes was worth much more than any figure. A team hired by Davis began installing the new ring and organizing the space, transforming the modest gym into a training center worthy of the talents developing there. Among the equipment, Davis had included something special for each young fighter. Personalized kits containing gloves, protectors, training clothes, and shoes specific for boxing. Each kit came with a printed letter, written by Davis with the help of a local translator, encouraging the young people to pursue their dreams with determination, just as Pacquiao had done decades earlier. For the trainer, a collection of technical books on modern boxing and a tablet with training videos that could be used to improve his teaching techniques. News about the American champion's generosity spread quickly through the city. In a few hours, a crowd had formed around the gym, including local journalists eager to record the moment. Davis, however, maintained his characteristic humility, avoiding the spotlight and emphasizing that his action was just a way to give back to the sport that had transformed his own life. In his heart, he knew he was following in Pacquiao's footsteps not only as a boxer, but as someone capable of using his position to elevate those who were still struggling to rise. As the afternoon progressed, Davis organized a small training session with the boys, now using the new equipment. The atmosphere was one of pure joy, with the young boxers showing even more commitment and dedication with their new materials. The 12-year-old boy who had caught his attention days before now moved with even more precision, his quick punches echoing through the renovated gym. Davis saw in him not just raw talent, but the potential to become truly exceptional. Before ending the day, the American made a silent promise to himself. This would not be his last visit to General Santos. The next morning, Davis was surprised by a call at his hotel. It was an assistant of Manny Pacquiao, informing that the legendary boxer had become aware of his presence in the Philippines and his generosity with the local gym. Pacquiao, who was in Manila for political commitments, expressed the desire to meet him personally before he returned to the United States. Davis's heart raced with the news. Meeting his idol was not in the original plans of the trip, but now seemed like the perfect ending to his journey in the Philippines. The meeting was set for that same afternoon, in a small house that Pacquiao maintained in General Santos, not far from where he had grown up. Davis arrived punctually, nervous like a rookie about to step into the ring for the first time. The residence, although comfortable, maintained the characteristic simplicity of the Filipino, without unnecessary ostentation. Pacquiao received Davis with a warm hug, as if they were old friends reuniting after a long separation. The mutual respect between the two champions was evident, transcending differences in age, nationality, and fighting style. 4 hours, the two talked about boxing, life, and overcoming. Pacquiao shared stories of his childhood that had never been published, revealing details of internal struggles and difficulties that few knew about. Davis, in turn, opened up about his own challenges in the streets of Baltimore and how boxing had been his salvation. Despite their distinct origins, the similarities in their journeys were impressive. Two men who had used their fists to rewrite destinies that seemed predetermined by poverty and adverse circumstances. Pacquiao expressed his deep gratitude for Davis's gesture with the local gym. He explained how adequate facilities made a difference in the formation of young talents, and how many potential champions in the Philippines never got to develop their full potential due to lack of basic structure. The Filipino veteran then surprised Davis with a proposal to personally train the 12-year-old boy who had caught the American's attention whenever his political commitments allowed. It was an extraordinary gesture from a champion who, even away from professional rings, maintained the desire to cultivate the next generation of Filipino boxers. At the end of the meeting, Pacquiao led Davis to a room at the back of the house, where he kept his most precious memories. There, among trophies and belts, was the first pair of professional gloves he had used. With a solemn gesture, Pacquiao removed the gloves from the display and offered them to Davis, a symbol of passing the torch between generations of boxers who used their success to inspire others. With tears in his eyes, the American accepted the gift, promising to honor its meaning not only in the ring but also outside it, continuing the legacy of generosity that now united the two champions. Back in the United States, Davis couldn't get the Philippines out of his thoughts. The images of the young boxers, the simplicity of Pacquiao's childhood home, and the warmth of the Filipino people remained vivid in his memory. During his training sessions in Baltimore, he frequently found himself recalling the determination in the eyes of those boys who trained with improvised equipment, a determination that now served as additional fuel for his own career. The gloves gifted by Pacquiao occupied a place of honor in his home, not as a trophy, but as a constant reminder of the responsibility that accompanied his success. 3 months after his return, Davis surprised his fans by announcing that part of the purse from his next fight would be destined to support community gyms in underprivileged areas. In interviews, the American boxer openly shared how his trip to the Philippines had transformed his vision about the privilege and responsibility that accompanied his position in the boxing world. Without fanfare or seeking recognition, Davis began regularly sending equipment and resources to the small gym in General Santos, ensuring that the initial momentum wasn't lost over time. The 12-year-old boy, now occasionally training with Pacquiao himself, became a sort of remote protege for Davis. The American followed his progress through videos sent by the local trainer, offering tips and encouragement. In a conference call that brought together the young boy, Pacquiao, and Davis, the two champions decided to create a special opportunity, bringing the boy to the United States during his next school vacation for a month of intensive training with Davis's team in Baltimore. News of the Filipino youth's imminent trip to train with Davis caused a stir in General Santos. Local newspapers published stories about the boy who had caught the attention of 2 world champions, transforming him into an instant celebrity in his community. For the young man, the opportunity represented more than a dream come true. It was the validation of years of dedication, waking up before dawn to run, training with improvised equipment, and persisting even when the path seemed impossible. His eyes shone with the same determination that Davis had recognized in their first meeting, now amplified by the promise of a future that had previously seemed unattainable. As he prepared his gym in Baltimore to receive the young Filipino, Davis reflected on the transformative power of small gestures. What had begun as a tourist visit driven by curiosity and admiration had transformed into a deep connection that transcended borders, languages, and generations. Without grand announcements or formal structures, just with the genuine intention of giving back to the sport that had transformed his own life, the American was helping to shape the future of a young man who, perhaps one day, would carry the same legacy of excellence and generosity that Pacquiao had established in the Philippines. The young Filipino's arrival in Baltimore was discreet, without the presence of cameras or reporters. Davis had insisted that this experience be about boxing and learning, not about publicity. The boy, accompanied by his Filipino trainer, was personally received by the American champion at the airport. The young fighter, normally confident in the ring, seemed intimidated by his idol and the imposing American city. Davis, noticing his nervousness, shared that he had also felt that way the first time he left Baltimore to fight in Las Vegas. That simple confession of vulnerability created an instant connection between the established champion and the aspiring one. The month of training was intense and transformative. Davis opened the doors of his private gym, allowing the young Filipino to train side by side with professional fighters. Each morning began with runs at dawn, followed by technical sessions, strength work, and agility exercises. The afternoons were dedicated to controlled sparring and analysis of videos of great fighters, including both Pacquiao and Davis. The American made a point of personally participating in various sessions, correcting positions, teaching defensive movements, and sharing secrets that had taken years to master. Beyond physical training, Davis organized cultural experiences for the young visitor. He took him to basketball games, introduced him to local cuisine, and showed him both the prosperous neighborhoods and the challenged areas of Baltimore, explaining how the city had shaped him as a man and athlete. In a particularly significant gesture, Davis took the boy to meet his first trainer, an elderly man who had believed in him when no one else did. That meeting deeply moved the young Filipino, who understood that even the greatest champions need mentors and supporters in their journeys. In the last week of training, Davis organized a small exhibition at his gym. Without a large audience, only other boxers, some close friends, and selected journalists were invited to attend. The young Filipino demonstrated his progress in a few rounds of sparring with other young fighters from Davis's academy. His natural speed, now refined by advanced techniques learned during the month, impressed everyone present. A renowned fight promoter, present discreetly at Davis's invitation, approached after the exhibition, interested in maintaining contact with a Filipino trainer about the boy's future development. On the eve of his return to the Philippines, Davis surprised the young man with a video call with Manny Pacquiao. The three talked for almost an hour, with the Filipino veteran asking about every detail of the training and offering additional advice. At the end of the call, Pacquiao made an unexpected announcement. He was organizing a youth tournament in the Philippines in the coming months and wanted the boy to be the main highlight of the event. Davis, immediately enthusiastic, promised to travel again to the Philippines to personally attend. The young man, overwhelmed with emotion, couldn't find words to express his gratitude. His dream, which before seemed as distant as the stars, now had a concrete path before him, paved by the generosity of two champions who had decided to invest in his potential. A year after Davis's initial visit to Pacquiao's childhood home, the American returned to General Santos. This time, he came neither alone nor in secret. His technical team accompanied him, all eager to attend the youth tournament organized by Pacquiao. The small gym he had renovated was now thriving, serving dozens of young boxers from the region. At the entrance, a simple but elegant plaque thanked Davis's contribution, with photos of the American training with local youth during his first visit. The tournament had attracted talents from all parts of the Philippines, but the main attention was on the young man who had trained with Davis in Baltimore. Now 13 years old, he had grown a few inches and developed his technique even further, combining natural speed with defensive movements learned from the American and the characteristic aggressiveness of Pacquiao's style. His family, wearing T-shirts with the names of both champions printed on them, watched proudly from the front rows. What had begun as a casual encounter in an improvised gym had transformed into an opportunity that would change the destiny of the entire family. Davis watched each tournament fight attentively, analyzing the young talents like an experienced scout. At his side, Pacquiao shared stories about the challenges faced by Filipino boxers and how events like that were rare when he started his career. The two champions, from different generations and origins, had developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and the shared commitment to create opportunities for young fighters. Without formal structures or grand announcements, just through direct actions and constant support, they were gradually changing the reality of boxing in the Philippines. When the time came for the main fight, the gym was completely packed. The young protégé entered the ring with the same silent determination that had impressed Davis the year before, now amplified by the confidence that came from intensive training. His performance was exceptional. Fluid movements, impeccable defense, and combinations of punches that resembled a dancer executing a perfectly rehearsed choreography. At the end of 3 rounds, the victory by unanimous decision was just a formality. The real triumph was in the path that opened before him. After the award ceremony, Davis and Pacquiao invited the young champion and his family for a private dinner. Away from cameras and fans, the two professional boxers presented a plan they had developed together. Without creating institutional structures, just with personal commitments, they promised to support the boy's career in the coming years. Davis financing equipment and travel for international competitions. Pacquiao supervising his training in the Philippines and using his influence to open doors in the Asian boxing world. It was a model they intended to replicate with other talented youth, not through formal organizations, but through direct connections and genuine support. The boy, listening attentively to those who were his greatest idols, understood that he was receiving much more than a sporting opportunity. He was receiving a lesson about the true meaning of success, the ability to use one's own position to elevate others. A simple tourist visit had transformed into a chain of generosity that would continue to extend far beyond that moment, touching lives that Davis and Pacquiao might never personally know, but who would carry forward the legacy of two champions who understood that their greatest victory was not in the titles won, but in the lives transformed. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.